Welcome back to the Work in Progress podcast, where we are talking about humans with learning in progress, not necessarily the polished outcomes. I'm Mindy Weick. I'm your software engineering host, and today I have Anna Miller joining me from sunny California. Is it sunny today? I didn't ask.
Yes, very sunny and extra warm.
And Anna is the founder of Outlier Mentors, which is a career mentorship community for software engineers who are looking to move into their career. She studied business and entrepreneurship at Boston University and took a path into tech before moving into coaching and mentoring and founded Outlier Mentors not too long ago. She has over 44,000 LinkedIn followers who tune in for her straight talk on what actually works in today's job search. And spoiler alert, it's not just blasting out applications. I think we'll get into more of that here soon. Anna has coached over 100 engineers into roles at companies like Google and Amazon and using a network first approach and referrals approach. So you've been in the trenches helping out early career engineers with navigating into this difficult job market in tech, and I am so excited to get into it. So thank you so much for joining me, Anna. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mindy. It's a great intro. I appreciate it. I would just like to add that with the advance of AI know that's on everyone's mind. The way people get jobs and who gets hired will be more and more updated and changing. So it's kind of very important to keep that in mind that we're basically, as a tech community, the whole tech industry is entering into like a whole new phase.
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of people still are looking at tech as if it was like the 1980s, but hiring is not the same, work is not done the same way, and the pace of change has accelerated the last 3 years. So everything is basically being turned around, and everyone's kind of figuring out what to do next.
Yeah, yeah, and we talked recently about some of this like rapid change and about getting into tech now because even just since I got into tech a few years ago, it's changed so quickly. Before we jump into that, do you want to share anything about how you went from a business degree to tech? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I went to college way back, I went into business program because it was kind of the simplest program to enter. And um, I used it as a platform to just explore different topics. So I learned some things about business, but what they actually taught was very old school processes that no longer make sense. And this was years ago, right? So even years ago, things were kind of behind the scene, like behind the times. What I learned was everything on my own. So I did a freelance business for 2 years. Then I worked at advertising agencies. Then I worked in like a big financial corporation. I did all these different jobs in tech, like doing different tech project management work in order to gain the experience and knowledge of what it means to work in the tech industry. But every single like process or program out there, they can't possibly prepare you. So I feel like the more company education connects with real life experience, the better. But what's happening is that after working in tech for 10 plus years, I realized that the methods of getting into tech have again changed completely. It used to be very pathway oriented. Like if you get a CS degree, you have companies recruiting. There's still a little of that. But nowadays, even the earliest grad is required to perform at like a mid level as a minimum, which means they have to already have work projects, already have some context and knowledge. Like you're going to learn on the job, but you can no longer just learn everything you need from your first job. You have to have like three pre jobs before the real job.
Yeah, on that, do you have a lot of people who come in with like, I've had internships, or do you think that those projects are enough to sort of jump into it?
Well, of course, you want internships, projects, work experience, hackathons, all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
what's really interesting is that with the advance of not AI, but with the advance of LinkedIn,
Yeah.
as that one big social platform, the most important skill nowadays is online visibility.
Hmm.
So if you are in the technology industry and you don't know how to be visible online, you either A, have a very good network already, and I promise you're probably not an early grad if you have a good network already, right? You're probably an experienced engineer at this point. Usually you're in the camp B, which is I need to break into an industry, a company, a niche, something like that. And you don't have like the visibility to get those interviews. Additionally, I want to drop in a slight um, additional kind of note. People take emails way too seriously. People take the written word as if we were like in like the 1800s. You get an email and you believe what it says. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is not how the world works. But no one told them that, right? If you're like a 21-year-old and you get an email that says, we reviewed your profile, you literally think someone reviewed your profile. So I just want to point
Yeah.
out as a note, do not take anything that's written from an email actually seriously unless you've spoken to that person and they confirmed it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the rise of the ATS system, which I have never passed. We'll have to talk about that some other time. But they always think that I'm spelling my name wrong because both of my names are odd spellings. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, with the advent of the ATS, like there's so much automation that I'm sure it's pretty rare for people to look at. What do you think, actually? I don't. I'm assuming.
Well, if you like to jump into that right away, basically, if you don't become visible, you become um, basically open to interpreting everything as if it's like accurate. And interpreting every single email you get, every communication at face value leaves you open to being very like vulnerable and like also misinformed. So like
Yeah.
every single email, every single DM, what you see is not 100% what it means. So if you're lacking information because you're not networking, you're not putting yourself out there, you're not going to hackathons and things like that and networking events, you're basically lacking information. So you're leaving yourself super vulnerable to just taking in any information that you get. And what information are you left with? You're left with your social media feed and those emails. And our
Yeah.
brains just process information. Like we're humans, we're more than that. But at the core of it, the job search process is highly emotional and we get very triggered. So you're either exposing yourself to more information so you can learn more, you're either learning or you're avoiding,
Hmm.
right? And if you're not learning, you're always just left with absolutely zero information. So you get one email that says, we reviewed your application, and you think, oh, they did that. And no, they probably have not, or they have, and they just don't want to talk to you right now. I've had multiple clients land interviews, land offers because they've pursued networking and have gotten their applications seen. People think that one, no AI is reviewing applications just yet because it's not at that level recruiters want. And
Right.
two, recruiters press a bunch of buttons and it doesn't mean anything. So either you expose yourself to more information through people or you're leaving yourself vulnerable to whatever like face value you get in an email. So I would suggest to always be learning, collecting more information and learning how to do that. And one of the biggest ways is visibility online. So you can actually take in more of the right information and make your own decision, not kind of take someone's word and think that that's true.
Yeah, and that's very valid. And I'm also glad that you brought up a point earlier about how the job process is so, or the job search process rather, is so emotional. I think it's important to like actually acknowledge that and take it in as part of the process. So thank you for bringing that up. But on that note, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your business and what you do? Because it is mostly, you
Sure.
know,
So
that
we'll kind of
process.
summarize that. So basically, for the past 4 years, I've been exclusively helping software engineers understand and navigate the job market. So I actually started specifically with networking, which you have discovered yourself and kind of understood the value there. And your latest job came through that as well. And what's really interesting is I used to believe that to get into a brand name company or something that was kind of like felt unachievable or out there, um, like that would take years or that would take some kind of extra effort or something like that. But it's just who you know, like if you met someone that can refer you and it's a good match and something like that. And
Yeah.
it's not going to be one to one. You're not going to always get that offer, for example, but the more people you meet, the more exposure you have to these companies. And what's really interesting that many engineers and most people don't realize is the bigger name companies, like one of the company you're at is very known in tech, right? They're
Hmm.
so known, they get more applications. That means the likelihood of a referral surfacing is very high because the more applications the company gets, the more value a referral could get. Doesn't mean a referral is going to guarantee an offer. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But what I realize is that LinkedIn gives everyone the platform to network with people from any company, no matter where you want to go. And there's so many access points, there's so many people on it posting and things like that, that eventually someone will reply and someone will give you a referral and someone will help you. So, like, we started with only in-person networking, and now we have this wealth of, people at our fingertips. So what I realized was there is a big gap in how to access that and how to leverage, how to use that. Like talking to people in DMs is a skill. Talking to founders, recruiters, those first calls, having connection calls is a skill, like all those things. So I realized that by teaching people these skills, they could leverage LinkedIn and do better in their careers. It would also expose them to that level of information I was talking about.
Hmm.
So, if Mindy, you never went on LinkedIn and started kind of seeing who was posting, seeing what was happening, you would be limited to very, very few bits of information, right?
Yeah.
Like LinkedIn is where things are happening right now. Maybe later, something else, but right now it's LinkedIn. So the first thing I did was help people with networking, and then I added interview preparation. So what we do now is do the full end-to-end process of helping you find opportunities through leveraging networking, which is a whole set of steps. And then we have technical mentors that help you with those tricky behavioral interviews, those complex lead code problem interviews, DSA, and of course, system design.
Hmm.
On top of that, we have live coding, right? We have candidates going through all kinds of interviews. Every single company has their own take on it. And especially startups love live coding. Big tech loves lead code. So there's a mix out there. So right
Yeah.
now, we kind of do it all. And it's meant to really fill in all those skill gaps for the interview process, which everyone naturally has because there's no like university semester of like how to do this, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're
Surprising.
building at Outlier Mentors.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned to me earlier that there is a difference between landing in an interview and then passing an interview, which it sounds like, yeah, like landing an interview based on my um, absorption of what you're saying. Landing an interview is a lot more about the networking process and like connecting with people, and then passing the interview is a little bit of that as well. But you're working with just like one specific or or like a specific group of people, and potentially doing PSA algorithms, leak code, whatever it might be, some kind of a coding
Yeah, I
interview.
feel like getting the interview is just making one dish, for example, in cooking metaphors. And then passing the interview is like cooking a whole dinner with like 4 courses. And you need to know the recipes and the cooking style of all the courses.
Yeah.
And somehow, the expectation is that you take the time to prepare and that you go through all this process. And now it's way more complex than people expect it to be, but that's how it is because there's so many people trying to move around. Um, so the market is definitely changed. The market is more competitive, and that's to be expected. Um, I feel like, especially more senior engineers that have gone through many different interviews are almost like shocked by the level of complexity of interview prep now required because
Yeah.
before knowing a certain technical skill used to be a unique skill. Like I once met someone who his whole skill was like electric companies hire people to like hang wires and like in the mountains, you have these like big electrical wires or wherever. Eventually, the electric company needs to expand. So there are these people that just do that and they're really good at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, it's like a niche. Now, engineering, you have to like come in and be really good at like all these different things that you never had to train for and like just perform on the spot. And before you never had to do that, right?
It's almost like instead of training for like I'm gonna go with a sports analogy. You can choose not to go with this. It's almost like training for like a big game, but
Yes, yes,
instead now you're
exactly.
training for like the Olympics. Maybe that's a little
Yes,
too much.
that's a great one. Exactly. So that didn't used to happen. So
Yeah.
people, right, would have these niche skills, but yeah, you just have to kind of train for all of these things and do that with new people that you never met. So
Yeah.
that creates a lot of pressure and um engineers coming on earlier into the process, the ones that are earlier in their careers, they just kind of start there. That's what they have to do. So they kind of
Mhm.
start by practicing. But those people that have been in the industry, they kind of have to reset their expectations and practice more.
Yeah. I
But
know
yeah,
that
there's a
you
big
you
difference between the landing the interviews and then getting the offer.
yes. And it makes sense because they are different skills. Um, and I know that you're like I don't know if I want to say bread and butter, but like your niche tends to be like the early career folks, because like they've never learned these skills. Do you approach it any differently for folks who are mid or senior level? Like they should have some of those skills. Does it change much, or are you typically teaching all of them roughly the same beginning concept of how to network?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So the first step is teaching people how to network to become really good salespeople of themselves.
Hmm.
That's a skill in its own to talk to more people, to reach out to more people, to be more visible online. There's a lot of beliefs around social media that get dumped onto LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is not only a social media, it's like a job discovery tool, but if
Yeah.
you use it, in a social way, not in like a job board way. So, you could certainly apply to jobs online, but if you only limit um, your strategy to that, you limit visibility. So,
Hmm.
for example, just this week, a client applied to a job and got that rejection email. And I said, well, that email doesn't mean anything. I think they just hit a button to clean up their list.
Yeah.
And then he got invited for a recruiter screen the next day, because he kind of kept up his outreach and tried to contact people. We kind of assume so much, but usually people are busy. We either applied too late or position is closed, or we applied and they haven't even started interviewing. So it's good to not really assume anything and really broaden the scope of how many conversations, applications, and opportunities you pursue.
Yeah.
Because
That makes sense.
later in your career, you can maybe have a niche, but in the beginning, the first couple of years, you really want to broaden your scope. And not just to get the initial calls, just those first calls. But then the process to get an offer, so many things have to line up, right? And there's so much different prep. in terms of the interview preparation, the process is pretty standard if you follow it. It's like, oh, I want a muscular whatever body. Okay, well, here's what you do for a year, and then you get the results. You don't do that, it takes longer, you don't get that at all. It's just basic one-on-one, right? The thing is, everyone could use help. So we act as like a trainer and a coach for the interview prep process. We do mock interviews. We review different like problem sets, homework, things like that. So we basically guide candidates through that interview prep process.
Yeah, and it sounds like you go through the whole gambit, which is excellent because I don't know very many other folks that are offering that. Can you tell us a little bit about the mentorship model and like what kind of a commitment that looks like typically?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, my belief is that everyone could use someone in their corner. And the mentorship model basically involves a team of mentors. So, there'll be different people that need different mentors. So, for example, if
Hmm.
you're going for big tech, your focus is going to be on lead code, system design, and then behavioral, right? Lead code is very, very heavily used in big tech. That's not, a mystery. Then system design is second, and then behavioral, of course. But the model is really about matching you with the right people. So we have a couple of mentors that we kind of put in a group with a client, and then they work together on weekly preparation, weekly reviews, and mock interviews. Um, so the whole model is there's no time limit really. People can get help until they get an offer. That could be 3 months, 6 months, a year. It really varies on everyone's pace and everyone's process.
Yeah.
On average, how it might look like is if a client joins the first couple weeks, they get introduced to the networking process and maybe their technical mentor. So we have someone who focuses on DSA. And then a few weeks after that, they get introduced to their behavioral prep mentor and system design. And as they're going through it, they're always in touch on Slack and they're always communicating. So basically, think of it as like a customer service team for your job search.
That sounds nice. To have so much support and like you said, have someone in your corner. So I like the sound of that. So we talked a little bit about how like you've had all these experiences both in tech and with career mentorship and coaching. Can you tell us a little bit about anything specific that you're working on right now, or potentially something that you believed early on that you've since changed your mind about, having had all these experiences now?
Yeah. So, one thing that we added is AI role play that wasn't really ready a few years back, but now you could basically have a role play available at any time, set up on a very specific context on a job description, and it'll give you feedback immediately because it's AI and you can learn very quickly on your own time. So clients join from all like at different places in their career. They could be working full time, job searching full time, part time. They could have a family. They could have different things going on. So by having a like an AI interview prep assistant at any time, that really helps. And specifically for behavioral. So this AI role play, it's actually targeted for a lot of salespeople, like sales enablement and sales prep because when you hire a sales rep, there's a lot of training that goes in there. But it's also used on the education side for onboarding or supporting some kind of like presentation skills, things like that.
Yeah.
So most interviews are like a performance. They ask you a couple questions and you got to like perform as natural as possible while keeping on script, right? Um, a lot of people without practice you fall off script, you start to ramble, you get freaked out, and then you like stare. Um, different things, occur. So the thing is, we only have this like one first impression, which is pretty crazy, like how the interview process is set up, and such high stakes. If you fail this one first impression, you like completely lose your ability to get this like 100K offer, right? And it's like, that's nuts. Um, so it's kind of like preparing for a big talk. You want to spend hours the past couple weeks, like actually preparing how you talk about different projects and how you introduce yourself, things like that. So we introduced AI role plays for clients that have very time sensitive interviews, have a lot of like, processes going on. That way they can practice extra on their own, get feedback right away, and really just get really, really good at that communication level without having to be on someone else's schedule. And I really like that it gives you feedback right away as well.
I was gonna say that's the kicker here because you can like you're what you're experiencing is still fresh in your mind, so it's easier to be like, okay, so I did this, I did that.
Yeah, it does
Um,
everything. It records, it gives you feedback, it's
oh, nice.
customized to the scenario. So everything that you need is highly relevant and it's immediate. So if you're really serious about like getting that offer, you do these role plays and you have live mocks on top of that, then it's guaranteed that as long as you're a fit for the role, you have a 90% job chance to get the offer. Thing is, without this level of practice, your chances are more like like 50-50, kind of like we'll see what happens kind of thing. But why
Yeah,
even go into it if you're going to treat it like that? Um, it could also happen there's a mismatch. It's just not the right fit, and that's okay. But given that all the external factors line up and all that's left is up to you, like there's a lot of ways to basically show up in the right way.
no, that makes a lot of sense, and it's a great sounds like a great tool to have like in your pocket. Particularly like you said to help with people who have like a rapid like I need to get into this quickly. So yeah, anything that I'm missing on your end?
Yeah, I wanted to say that preparing for interviews is something that is definitely a slightly more difficult skill to acquire than networking.
Hmm.
And it also requires a lot of self reflection. And
Yeah,
there's a greater barrier to entry almost because it's something that like we never really do. Unless you're a public speaker, you never do these things. You don't write a script, record yourself, watch your recording, take notes of what you could have done better, record yourself again,
yeah,
right? Unless
yeah,
you want to be a speaker or already doing a ton of talks, unless you got like an invitation to a TED talk, which probably meant you already did talks, right? It's probably not going to be your first time.
yeah.
We never do these things. But the level of prep required is exactly that. We're basically asked to be perfect public speakers and talk about our mistakes on the spot, which with practice, no problem. You'll be like, I can tell you about 3 mistakes I made yesterday, and I have the format and I know how I want to phrase it. But without practice, one, how are you going to even remember anything? Our brains are not designed to surface like immediate memories based on very specific context in a pressured environment. Like no one is going to do that. Um,
Right.
Two, we're designed for just like casual human interaction to like have a good time together, not for clarity of thought and structured communication.
It's hard. It's very hard.
But the thing is, if you look at the other side, it's like this person has 30 minutes. They really want to get to know you. How are you going to help them?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what I realized is that once you get the networking down, you could have tons of interviews. And you can even be fooling yourself that your problem is still you don't have interviews. And let me tell you, there's so many seniors out there that tell this to themselves. Why? They don't want to go through the steps I just told you. Because that feels harder, right? Because it forces you to judge yourself in a very specific way, but you're actually learning, right?
Yeah.
But in any case, juniors are like, okay, go do this thing. They do the thing. Eventually they get through it. But the more experience you have, you almost have more emotional barrier to kind of like challenging yourself.
I could see that. Yeah.
But both, no matter the experience, once you master networking and you have a couple interviews, like you can literally get an offer from one interview if that's what you want, if it's a good match, if you do put in the time to prepare for that process. But
Yeah.
today's world requires that because of the high level of functioning employees are expected to come in.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
So no one's
Goodness.
like hiring you to be an admin assistant and like, take orders. Maybe it will feel like that if you get the company, but if it's a good company with good pay, with a good brand name, you will not succeed by just taking orders. And also your stories have to show ownership and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're brought in to think critically and solve problems, so that
Yes.
makes sense.
So exactly. So on top of that, like you're actually getting hired for your ability to speak about your critical thinking. Like you could be a great thinker, but if you're too long winded, well, this other candidate's not long winded and I got 30 minutes and I like their confidence. So I'm just going to go with them, you know?
Well, and that's gonna be a repeated thing too, like stand-up's only, X amount of minutes or X amount of time, and I need to
Exactly.
get your information.
It's not like an interview only skill, but it's highlighted. All your gaps, all your communication gaps are going to be highlighted immediately in an interview.
That's a good point.
So,
Um,
yeah, those are the things that are really important to focus on
yeah. No, and it's definitely something that we're not like, you learn as you go through life. You definitely don't get taught that typically in your
because it
schooling.
didn't used to
Um,
be as important because jobs used to be more local and you would actually build trust by meeting in person. And if you didn't get the role, it would be you're underqualified or you're just not a good fit. But
yeah, like
now,
there's a
or
reason.
whatever, the company changed their mind. But now you don't get the role because there's literally other people who spent the time preparing and they communicate better. And that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. As we wind down, if there is, I like to ask this question at the end. If there is absolutely nothing else that people remember from our conversation, what is the one thing that you would like people to walk away with?
If you end up recording yourself speaking about something, you will be a more successful person in life to do whatever you want to do. So that's what I learned in my own experience.
That's fair. I think I've heard that in a couple of scenarios, not just for speaking too. So that's fair. I mean, what sorry, I have a friend who is practicing curling and they get recorded as they work
Of
so they
course,
can see.
there's literally a whole web company out there making millions, billions of dollars. Think they're they have it Huddle, I think. Their entire platform is recording athletes, tracking their like progress on video, and giving performance stats. I mean, that's how things work.
How you improve. Yeah. No, I think that's a very valid point. So
In
thank you for the
corporate
advice because
in
I feel like
corporate
people don't
speak,
hear that. What's
you
that?
can
Sorry.
in corporate world, that's how it works.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like you're totally right because that's another thing that people don't hear very often. Like, how often is someone telling you, go record yourself? So thank
Yeah,
you. That's a good tip.
managers can definitely do that. And then imagine if managers actually asked you to do that, everyone would do it. They'd be like, "Oh, they asked me to do that." But they would do it because your salary would be dependent on it.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate all of your time and sharing all of your wisdom and the things that you've learned. It's been great having you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Minzy.
That's it for this commit of the Work in Progress podcast. If you liked it, please hit follow, leave a review, or share it with another human who's figuring things out too. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and keep showing up, even if it's still a draft. Until next time, keep iterating.